Iron sharpening iron is a brutal act. A hammer pounds, sparks fly, files grate, shavings fall away. To forge and perfect an edge, iron is often heated, cooled, twisted, and pulled. Sometimes it is even tortured into the shape it needs to be. In real life, sharpening often occurs through negative circumstances. In Yancey Young's case, his began in the summer of 2023.
I'm Yancey Young, and I have cancer.
Yancey was a baseball player for the Sumiton Christian Eagles in Sumiton, Alabama. He grew up playing ball in the local rec leagues, where he fell in love with the game and got used to standing alone.
Because I played outfield, so I kind of just enjoy standing out there by myself in center field. I can see everything. If there's a sunset, I could see it.
Yancey had plans to play at the college level and had his heart set to that end as he approached his senior season. But then the first signs of trouble occurred.
I was working out, I was doing anything to get better, and I started to have unusual back pain.
A doctor suggested he begin physical therapy, but the pain continued. And on July 19th, Yancey got the news that would change his life forever.
That day started out, I had went to work and he called me and he said, my back is killing me. So I said, okay, I'm gonna come get you. We're gonna go to the ER. And we went to the UAB standalone ER at Garndale. And they started out let's scan him real quick. Let's do a x-ray. They did an x-ray and they came back an hour later. And they said, let's go ahead and do a CAT scan just to see what's going on. And that's when they found the mass.
The CT scan had uncovered something totally unforeseen. A large tumor huddled beside his heart.
I fell on the floor. And a nurse came over there and she's like, you need to stand up, because at that time Yancey was just sobbing.
Scarlett tried to reach her husband, but he had fallen asleep after a long night shift at work.
She finally got a hold of her aunt, lives next door to us, and she came in the house and woke me up, and she's like, Scarlett needs you. She needs you. She can't get a hold of you. And something's real bad wrong. And then when I called her, all she could get out was Yancey's got cancer.
When I got to the hospital, I could immediately tell that something was off. I can just remember that moment so clearly in my mind. I was worried about him. Our whole life together just flashed through my mind of everything's about to change.
Yancey was transported to Children's Hospital in Birmingham the same day. Soon, a church friend, who also happened to be a nurse at the hospital, arrived.
She just went into nurse mode the second she got down there. 2 oncologists came in and they said, do you want to see the mass? And I said, do I want to? And she said, as his mom, you want to see what the mass looks like. And they pulled up the mass they showed it to us and how big it was. And it was just connected right next to his heart. And I think it was 16 centimeters. So it was huge. And that's all I could see when I looked at that picture, was that black spot sitting right next to his heart. I think I sit down again and I was sitting beside Daniel and our friend, and I just started crying. I just looked at him over there and he looked so healthy.
That night, Yancey was placed in special care ICU and the family met with oncologists to discuss a plan. Unfortunately, the bad news wasn't over.
When they biopsied the mass, they found more tumors in his abdomen, belly area, and then his stomach was also just filled with fluid.
Friends and family members, now aware of the devastating news, began to show up at the hospital in droves.
We were just surrounded by everybody, our immediate family, our church family, our school family. Baseball players were just up there with us almost 24 hours a day. I think within the whole time he was there, In 2 weeks, he had about 130 visitors. Like, people just kept coming and coming because they wanted to support him and us.
Yancey soon learned he had stage 3 T-cell lymphoblastic lymphoma. He was moved to an oncology floor just a few days later to begin treatment. Over the next 2 weeks, he lost 28 pounds as chemo coursed through his veins, and the Sumiton community battered the heavens on his behalf. Yancey's long hospitalization was taxing on his family, who snapped into strategic roles to fight this unrelenting enemy. Scarlett took a leave of absence from work and eventually became his full-time caretaker who never left his side. Daniel became the sole breadwinner for the family. Gabby became the supportive older sister who still had to pursue the life ahead of her. And Yancey was the high school senior athlete patient who forced himself to smile even though his future, yes, even his own life, was in jeopardy. Scarlett provided updates on her Facebook page and on July 22nd ended her post with a hashtag that would become a rallying point for Yancey's healing and recovery, 5 Strong.
When they found the tumor, one of the first people to know outside of our family was Ricky. The next day, he just put a 5 on the baseball team's Instagram account. And from that, I just added strong to the end. People just went with it. The school made t-shirts, our church made t-shirts, the school made the bracelet that all of us still wear. That's how I end every post I make about him on social media is 5 Strong.
Though Yancey was able to eventually return home, the treatments didn't stop. Clinic visits and constant physical therapy became a mainstay on the family calendar. Over the next few months, he endured blood clots, surgery to repair an infected port, multiple hospital stints and ER visits, blood transfusions, PET scans, fatigue, pain, hair loss, IVs, and tubes running in and out of his body. Milestones of his senior year were passing him by, and the trajectory of the family's collective emotion was dictated by pathology reports and scans of his body. Along the way, though, there was some good news. The big tumor was shrinking, and the little tumors had completely disappeared. What kept the family going was their faith, the unyielding support of family and friends, and the game of baseball. Throughout the fall, Yancey had a burning desire to get back onto the field, back to the game he loved, back to his teammates. But getting back wouldn't be easy. Physical therapy was grueling while cycling through chemotherapy. Even the slightest movements were laborious. His weekly roller coaster included dozens of chemo shots, exercise, and the inevitable crash and burn. The ordeal may have tested Yancey's resolve, but one thing was certain: cancer had an unrelenting enemy too. With baseball season just around the corner, Yancey was finally able to pick up a bat for the first time in November, joining his teammates for batting practice. Everyone could feel that the Eagles were poised for greatness, and it wasn't a stretch to think that the team could capture a state title under first-year head coach Ricky Bowen. All they needed was a little extra motivation. As it turned out, that motivation came in the form of Yancey Young.
Once he was reintroduced into the lineup, it just like reinvigorated everybody. It was like, okay, we got to get on, because the more we get on, the more he has a chance to go hit.
There was a new normal. It wasn't uncommon for Yancey to have a chemo treatment, take a nap, and then show up for practice. Yancey missed the first 2 games of the season, but was finally able to play in a game against Cleveland on February 20th. Getting back on the field was certainly a joy, but cancer had severely limited Yancey's ability to perform.
For those that don't know, he really couldn't run. One of the biggest issues was his feet, and that made it very difficult for us to use him as a DH because, yeah, he could hit, but he couldn't run down the baseline.
The Eagles marched through the regular season with an 18-4 record and made the playoffs. Another hospitalization in March threatened to derail Yancey's season altogether, but he recovered and rejoined the team just in time for a postseason run. With Yancey as their inspiration, the Eagles made it to the championship series against Sweetwater. Sumiton Christian took Game 1 but dropped Game 2, setting up a winner-take-all Game 3 for the state title. The Eagles, would not be denied. That afternoon, several Eagle players had multiple hits, including a certain cancer patient who collected 3 hits and 3 RBIs of his own.
Yancey gets to third base, and I'll never forget this because I didn't even know this at the time. Yancey hadn't crossed home plate all year. He had all these hits, he'd done all these things. He hadn't actually crossed home plate all year. And so, like, when you talk about like finishing the season, seeing him in that, I guess it was probably the next to last inning, get to actually cross home plate in his last high school baseball game. I thought that was just an incredible moment. And, you know, it was a God thing. It wasn't a me thing. Like, I didn't have the stats in front of me I didn't memorize them going out there to think about that. It was just what happened.
After the game, Coach Bowen said Yancey was the reason the team looked at each other like family.
The lessons that he taught for those that were willing and paying attention enough to learn are some of the most invaluable things. I cannot thank him enough for his courage, his consistency, his bravery, his willingness to laugh when most people would have broken down and cried. The strength that takes, I don't even have the words I can barely wrap my own head around it.
A year later now, Yancey is almost in full remission and is looking forward to ringing the bell to close the chapter on his treatment. What does it mean to be a teammate? What would you do if the same thing that happened to Yancey happened to your brother, sister, friend, or son? Would you get off the bench and bear their burden? Would you show up? Would you stand beside them in a time of trial? Would you sharpen them, or would you stand outside the fire? One of the hardest things in life is to lay down a love. And after the season, Yancey realized his dreams of playing at the next level were over. But through this agonizing reality, he found peace. Because sometimes change involves letting go of yourself so you can become who God wants you to be. Like iron forged from the hand of a blacksmith, Yancey is a stronger man for having endured this trial.
That's the only thing that got us through this was the Lord. He got Yancey through every step of the way. Yancey rarely complained. He might have looked horrible and felt horrible, but he was never going to complain about it. If you ask him how he was doing, he would say, I feel okay. And on his weakest days, he was stronger than all of us put together. And we just said from day one, it was the Lord getting him through this.
One day during Scarlett's harrowing journey, a Christian song gave her a bit of inspiration, underscoring the Lord's presence as we walk through the trials of life. I'm remembering you were right there, and you have been ever since. With every page that turns, I see your faithfulness. Oh, the mountain where I climbed, the valley where I fell. You were there all along. That's the story I'll tell. That's the story I'll tell.
I'm Yancey Young, and I have cancer. But cancer doesn't have me.